opportunity in its 100th anniversary by doing that, because it then wipes out everyone else out of history. But there is a crisis. There's a real crisis in the teaching of history and historiography in this country. It also, but there's an interesting new development. Whether it's going to take root is the panel set up by Blaine Zamande to look at promoting the humanities again, and history being a very central part of that. Have you seen that recommendations?
I know about it. I haven't read it in detail. I obviously must do so.
But there is a crisis in this
absolutely.
country.
But you know, not only here, there's a crisis in the humanities in the UK.
Yeah.
Globally, but in the UK, fees have been trebled for university students from £3,000 to £9,000 in 1 year, and they have cut the government grant in the humanities by, wait for it, 80%. And the expectation is that they will get the fees from the students, and it's only a handful of kids who are then going to do the humanities. I mean, it is an absolutely scandalous situation.
I'm going to take Ndifuna quickly, and then I want to just add something to what Omar said about the ANC rewriting history and teaching history around leaders.
Sorry for being late. According to my observation, I think as women, we push the struggle way back. And I can see that as women, we can take the struggle forward again, because we've got shoulders to cry. But what I would love to know, on your observation now, you mentioned the issue of 1967 when Chief Lagali Batele was the first president of the ANC. How do you see our politics as a South African now, from 1967 up until now?
So, but before you go on, one of the texts that we use as a foundational text here to help teach history in South Africa is a little book by Julia Wells that you know about.
Yes.
The anti-loss campaign of women in 1930. And it's amazing that most people don't know about it. And the president didn't say one word about it. And that book is totally out of print. Yet every child can understand it if they read it. And it touches on what Ndifuna said about women. And perhaps you can say a word or two about gender in your work and in historiography.
Yeah. Let me start with that because it's kind of easier. I think that the idea of gender in South African history really came in from outside South Africa, people studying in Britain and engaging with the feminist movement and feminist history writing in the 1970s, and then bringing it back to South Africa. Belinda Bozzoli, for example, major article, but also somebody like Jeff Guy writing a major article about the significance of gender in the historic Zulu kingdom. My own work, Not Ivan Experimental Doll and Divided Sisterhood, address gender issues absolutely directly. And I've always tried, and it's very hard, tried to include gender, even in this latest Cambridge history chapters. And looking at it, I talk about the importance of gender, I bring it in where I can, but it's still only a much thinner thread of the story because of the sources, because of the way that the history has been written so far. But I think there has been some really interesting work done in that area. Easier for me to talk about that than to talk about how I see South Africa at the moment. I mean, I see it as very bleak, much bleaker than I did in the 90s, and with some possibilities, but, you know, contesting against fearful odds. I don't know if you heard Zaki say, I came in this morning in something of a tizzy, funny word, because somebody had used my debit card last night fraudulently, and I spent the bank running around. Now, I'm sure everybody in this room has had an experience like that. And that isn't a sign of a healthy society. And, you know, when I thought about the transference, it was so obvious, it's banal, but when we looked at that incredible moment of 1994, and I was here at that time, and it was extraordinary. We never imagined that it could go this way. I mean, I always called South Africa...
We predicted it. We predicted it.
You predicted it. I always saw South Africa as a yo-yo society, in that I also said, sorry, what I wanted to say was I also said, but this isn't sustainable unless there's redistribution. And I wrote a piece saying precisely that in 94. And of course that hasn't happened.
Where is it published? Where is it published?
Oh God, it's in a collection. I'll have to send it to you.
Can you send it to us and we'll publish
well, I
it?
don't think it's a very good piece, but you can have it. But I mean, that is so fundamental. And if you have a society which is grotesquely unequal, you're going to have these problems of corruption. You're going to have these problems of crime and violence. And what people don't realize is that, and there's been fascinating work on this recently by epidemiologists, inequality is bad for your health, and not just for the health of poor people, everybody's health. There's a fantastic amount of work done in the UK and elsewhere showing that everybody in society suffers in terms of something as immediate and personal as their health if they live in unequal societies. And what's been happening across the world is that these inequalities have got much worse. Certainly, South Africa is not unique in that. Sorry, I don't think I've answered your question because it's unanswerable, but there we are.
There's another historian. To talk.
Related also to, somewhat to the ANC question, I'm curious what you think the role of history is in a young democracy like ours. I mean, not just like academic history, like public history. Should the focus be around nation building and sense of understanding of the history in a sort of not necessarily nationalistic way, but because nation building is nationalistic, but not inherently in that sort of ideological brainwashing way. But or do you think it's more purposeful to have these very sort of critical and ambiguous histories to move forward? What sort of history is most beneficial as you start building a young democracy?
I get a bit jittery when we talk about history for nation building. I think history has to be critical to be good. It has to understand the structure of society. That's not to say that I don't believe that people should learn to live together. And I think that's the critical thing that history should help us understand, that people have lived together over thousands of years. One of the reasons I said that there was a really exciting moment in this very early history of South Africa, for example, is that archaeologists are now able to show that in the first millennium, that's AD, there were Khoisan people in Gauteng building stone monuments, and they merged with Bantu-speaking people. And they show this both through linguistic analysis and through looking at these stone buildings and where people were living and so on. It's terribly important to understand the way in which people can live together, can learn from one another. And that seems to me more important than focusing on nation building. And it seems to me more important because clearly xenophobia is a problem here, and it's a problem in Israel, and it's a problem in America, heaven help us, and it's a problem in Britain. It's a universal problem, and that seems to me to be much more important than the sense of the nation, which extrudes immigrants, which discriminates against where people come from. So I would, if I had a lesson from history, and I don't like that phrase either very much, that would be my lesson from history.
Come on. Actually.
Compared to the Western countries like Britain, for example, how do you see religion influencing, or how have you seen religion influencing South African history and politics?
I think religion has been important in South Africa. I think it's understudied in the work that was happening from the 70s to the 90s, I suppose. There is some very good research on it. But clearly religion is a part of large numbers of people in this country, and sometimes for good and sometimes for ill. I'm not religious myself, but I equally am not a militant atheist, because I think there are positive values that can be brought by religion. But there are also very negative things that get learned from religion. I do think it's a subject that needs to be seriously studied. Obviously it has an enormous impact in a whole variety of ways on life here. In Britain, religion is much less important today than either here or in the United States of America, where it's gone wild. I mean, you look at the influence of religion in politics in America and you absolutely despair. It's a resort to irrationality on an incredible scale. So I'm not sure what lies behind the question you asked.
Missionaries?
Yeah, I mean,
but missionaries aren't the only part of religion.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is traditional religion. There are mission churches which have done an incredible amount of good in this country, and some which have robbed people of their own culture. So, it again demands much closer study of the specific than what do you think about religion.
Tina?
I want to ask what your views on what's happening in the Arab States at the moment, and what's possible effect on Israel would be. Would it just carry on forever, or would Israel get away with what they're doing?
I think the situation in the Middle East at the moment is very, very serious. And one of the things that appalls me is Israel seems to be unaware of this and making it one hell of a lot worse with the talk of invading Iran, etc. And with its very downbeat, to put it mildly, response to what's been happening in the Arab world. Now, I'm not saying that it's clear-cut what's happening in the Arab world. I think it's, again, a very ambiguous situation. But internationally, I think this is one of the really critical issues being faced and not being resolved in any way. And both sides, well, particularly Israel, because that is the power in the region, has really closed the possibilities of a dialogue under Netanyahu. So this, yeah, I mean, like everybody else, we don't know what's going to happen as a result of the so-called Arab Spring, which seems to me to have turned into something of an Arab winter, was what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iran. And, you know, George W. Bush has one hell of a lot to answer for in the parlous state of politics in the Middle East.
I'm taking 2 more questions and then we'll close off.
It's nice to see you. Thanks. Just before everybody goes, can I just say something else about history?
Omar?
No, well, they don't need to say. But one of the reasons I came to talk to you today was because I feel passionately that we need to get history out into the community. And I was so pleased to have this invitation. I haven't agreed to give a seminar at UCT this year, but talking to you is much more interesting and I think much more important.
Thank you very much.
You say first.
Well, just my own field is literature and literary history, and just on the issue of gender in history, Professor Margaret Damon was telling me recently that she's working on letters written by Lillian and Goy.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so that's obviously a crossover, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the other crossover is that there are now an amazing number of autobiographies, particularly of women, which are absolutely vital if we're going to write women back into history.
It ends up that I'm going to have to take 2 questions, one from my boss, but first from my promoter.
Thank you, Comrade. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to ask about your views around 3 components that we came across as the activists in South Africa. The issue of basic education, the issue of service delivery, that includes poor support system of water or clean water, sanitation, and the issue of health, hoping that national health insurance will come across to try to combat some of the challenges that we are having. Based on your observation, is there any possibilities that our government can try to address some of the issues that we are facing in these activities? Because in most of the cases, although we are democratic, but people are still suffering and staying in poverty out there. If you are looking at touching lives activities, we saw many people suffering across the country. So based on observation, what do you think it's possible to meet some of the issues halfway or to address some of the issues? Thank you.
Let's take Greg too, and then Shula can.
I've been talking now, so apologies if this has been asked.
Can you just shout a bit?
Apologies if this has already been asked, but I'm quite interested in the impact that social media has on the recordal of history from activists or those involved, for example, in the Arab Spring, and how that will affect and continue to affect the telling of a story, not only in revolutions or so-called revolutions, but just generally how that will affect recordal and history books and that kind of thing, and what are your thoughts on that?
2 huge questions. I mean, and I don't...
So, sorry, she's on Facebook. She joined Facebook, so well, you can all make friends with Shula Marx on Facebook and ask her questions.
It's not going to help you much because I don't know how to answer on Facebook. One of the things Zaki's going to teach me when we all leave here. I only got on Facebook because I you remember I said that there was this discussion program on SAFM and I wanted to hear a replay. So I got onto the SAFM website, which told me that I could only get information by going onto Facebook. So I went onto Facebook, but I actually don't know how to use Facebook except to email Zaki.
Rosa can tell you.
No, I don't think so. I don't think she's on Facebook, actually. But, sorry.
We'll help you.
You'll help me. Which is why I don't think I'm very well equipped to really answer your story. But clearly this has revolutionized the way in which people can communicate, the way in which they can call people out to demonstrations. I mean, it's a very powerful tool. It's a powerful tool both ways, of course. This is always the crux of the thing. So I think it's too early to say how it's going to help historians. I think that something like Google is an extraordinary resource for historians, but can also be subject of abuse, and it can be very distracting. So you just mine bits out of Google and write the history accordingly. So there's still room for critical historians with an available source material, which is just unprecedented. And with digitization, I mean, I was saying the Institute papers are now being digitized, but huge quantities of stuff, of archives and so on. And I think for the serious historian, that is very, I mean, I can sit in my study at home and read journal articles from, in fact, I can read them here, that are in my college in London. And this is an extraordinary thing for historians, and does make the task both more difficult, because there is more you can do, takes longer, and assimilating it and being critical about it is as demanding as ever. But clearly from the point of view of exchanging information, getting to a wider audience, either through Wikipedia or through the social media, it is an extraordinary challenge and an extraordinary opportunity. That's fairly banal. I don't know if I can say anything more than that, though. We've certainly seen in the Arab Spring, but also in the student demonstrations in London, incredible use of Facebook, and in the riots in London last year. Although I think that was overplayed. I don't think it was just Facebook. I mean, Facebook on its own doesn't get people out unless they've got good reason or some reason to get out. On the issue of, sorry, I've forgotten the first question, haven't I?
Education, health and so on.
Well, I mean, you've obviously put your finger on absolutely key issues, and it goes back to what I was saying about inequality and the need for redistribution. How likely is that? I think it's up to you. You know, people like you. This is another reason why I came today, because I think the future is in your hands, and it's not an easy thing. But I think that people have to protest and work together to change not just at the kind of political level, but exactly as you're doing, demanding change in relation to health, demanding change in relation to education, and organizing to get that. Whether the National Health Insurance Plan will resolve all the problems, I'm not sure. I would have preferred to have seen a National Health Plan without the insurance aspect to it. But, you know, one has to get what you can get and work from there. So, yeah, I do think half a loaf is better than none. I am encouraged, and one area that I think I am encouraged by is health, because I think that Motsoaledi is, you know, at least there's somebody who understands about primary health care, understands what has to happen in rural clinics, and has really been very upfront about the horrific scourge of AIDS. So I don't know if you will agree with me, but it is a different situation. I assume that's why, one of the reasons why we want to look at social justice across a wider field than just the HIV/AIDS field. But that has showed us what you can do through organization, now through social media, and through education. But it's a long haul. And unfortunately, I think that once people get to the top, there are so many other opportunities for them to be comfortable that they forget where they've come from. Okay.
So we've got a little present, Greg. Kylie, you have to, because you did all the work for this today.
Oh my goodness. That is wonderful.
We have to tell you that Kylie is our administrator, but she's also a final year psychology student.
Fabulous.
And she got 6 distinctions last year.
Ah, fantastic. That is beautiful. And you showed me the way. That's wonderful. Thank you, Kylie.
Just before we go, just a special thanks to Shula. I think we can all agree that she is probably one of the most remarkable South Africans. She knew Oliver Tambo. She knew Mantu Shabalala Msimang.
Oh.
She knew many, many, many people in our liberation movement. Some have passed on, some were still around, like Jeff Khadebe. When she taught a little bit about Zulu history, I think.
Yes.
So we really want to say to Shula, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for your enormous contribution to our different identities and our understanding of our society.
Can I just say thank you again, because this has been a great moment for me. I really enjoyed meeting you all. The questions were terrific and not always easy to answer. And the future belongs to you. Oh my.
Please come.
Yes, strawberry there.
So you've got 400 rand.
And that was before they knew. Can't I just give the 400 rand to you?
Give it to Kylie and say she can buy food for the next seminar.
Okay.
Like, since you see that there's a kind of a shift away from humanities and social science, I don't think it's an example of the land issue now.